So thank you. So last time I was here, we did kind of went through rules and just talked about some different situations and how to score and either how to maximize points or minimize points given up in that process. And so today I'm going to kind of go through the last part of this, which is strictly over like attack, counter attack, which is probably the most difficult area in terms of see how it gets called, what are the little the small details that referees are looking for, how do they determine, where those get parsed. So I'm kind of go through some of those examples as we go through that. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. One of the things when I switch over here and share my screen is that I won't be able to see faces, or I won't know if there's questions. I won't be able to see that because I'll try to maximize the video part. So feel free to, pull up have the chat or step in and just ask a question. I'll gladly go through some things in more detail. All right, so here we go. First one, part two here. So we're going to be looking, as I mentioned, attack, counterattack. And the first thing I'm going to start with is just some important questions. And I think these are the types of questions that I know that we talk about, like when we have referees meetings. Here's the things that we're discussing. Here's the things that we're talking about. Here's the parts that we're looking for to determine where and how these points get scored in this process. So these are the questions, and it's probably important to know those as well as a coach, because now you can think about, okay, how do I get to this part? How do I score more points? So how can I minimize those points I'm going to give up if this action occurs? One of the first questions we take a look at on that attack, counterattack, and when I think of this, I'm thinking like, double leg body lock or any leg attack that there's a counterattack to it. That's what I'm really focusing on here, because this is probably the most common scenario that we see that happens at a lot of competitions and duels and matches, and how do those get scored and why are they scored a certain way? So the first question that we typically look at is, did the attacking wrestler maintain the hold throughout the action? So did they on the leg attack, were they able to maintain the lock on the leg or legs during the duration of the action, or did they let go? If they are able to maintain the hold, typically that's going to increase their chances of scoring the higher points of that scenario. If they make an attack and they let go to post a hand or do something while a counterattack is happening, that may give an opportunity for the counterattack to score more points. So that's one of the first things we look at is, did they maintain that lock throughout the hold? Second question, and probably even more importantly, I know this is a big part, is did the attacking wrestler have one leg or two legs? Was it a double leg or was it a single leg, a head outside, a high crotch, something like that? Because I think there's a big difference between if you get the two legs versus if you get one leg on how it gets scored. And so we're going to take a look at some examples of videos, and I'll show you some videos. Okay, here's an example where we have one leg, look at the scoring, and now look, here's two legs, look at the scoring, the difference in that part. So I think this is an important part, and as a coach, this is one thing I'd be stressing a lot is how are we able to get the two legs, in that process. Third situation here is, did the defensive wrestler stop or change the direction of the attacking wrestler? The action is going one way. We know all as wrestling coaches that with certain actions, by where they're supposed to go, are supposed to finish a certain direction. Typically if I'm making a double leg, I typically am not going to finish going to my head side. I'm going away from the head side. So if something happens where that direction doesn't go where it's supposed to, then now we're looking that there was a direction change. Maybe this is the counterattack. So we're looking for those parts. Was there a stop in the action where they stopped and then an action took place? So all those things can help the defensive wrestler come up with the higher points in that scenario as well. So that's another question that we're looking at from a referee standpoint. Fourth question, did the defensive wrestler go flat to their back? So while they're under attack and they may be making a counterattack, did they go flat to their own shoulders in that process? there's a lot of time, anytime you see that, it's very difficult for that defensive wrestler to make that counterattack and get the higher point value if they go to both shoulders in the process. I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen. It's just less likely that it's going to. All right, so that's another place to take a look at. Who ended up in the danger position? Sometimes you look at an action and you're like, it's really questionable. Like it's you have the attack, you have a counterattack. Sometimes you look and see who ended up in danger, and based on who ended up in danger is usually a good indicator of who's going to end up getting the higher points in that scenario. And then we typically say, when in doubt, the higher points go to the attacking wrestler. So if there's a question and it's really close and you're trying to decide, is it attack, is it the counterattack that scores? Just know that if there's a question in the referee's mind, they're going to score the attacking wrestler the higher points. Okay. Now, I'm going to start to kind of go through some videos and talk and kind of go through the scoring situation for these. One thing I want to make sure I make note of, like, you're getting, again, in this process, you're getting my opinion. So as I go through this, you're getting how I've seen this called at a lot of national tournaments, how I've seen this called at international tournaments, and I can piece together these videos to help. But just because we talk about it doesn't mean that when they go there, it's going to get called that way every time. All right, there might be some different situations depending on where you're standing as a referee. It looks differently. So, please keep in mind that this is not the, just because I say this is how it should be called, doesn't mean it may get called that way every single time. But you're just getting my opinion on that process. All right, first situation here is the one leg versus two legs. All right, so let's watch this action and we'll take a look at scoring wise. Go back. Usually this first video takes a little bit of time to get going. Okay. Go back again here. So here we have a leg attack by blue, and then red makes a counterattack. The question is who gets what points? And my favorite part about this video is if you watch I watch the technique, but then I also watch the referees to see what they did. And I can tell you right now, so if I watch the referee scores this as for blue. And I don't know if he scored anything else, but the judge scored it as for red. So here we are at the World Championships a couple of years ago, and here we have the referees. They scored it two different ways. All right, now what I can tell you, and it got confirmed as for blue, but I can tell you this got challenged, and the correct score here, so, or at least what should have been scored here. So the first thing is when you look at this, blue makes a leg attack, but blue has how many legs right now? Blue has one leg. This is important. So in this process, red is then able to make a counterattack. Again, I don't know, like in this process, like this is going to be a difficult finish here. They stop and then goes right over top. And so I think there's two things here. Number one, she only had one leg. And number two, she let go of the lock in the process. Like she had the leg and she let go of the blue, let go of the leg in this process. So I think the judge scored this correctly as for red. So again, one leg versus two. One leg, in my opinion, opens you up for counterattacks and for the higher point value to go to the counterattack. Have blue got to two legs, got to a double there, I think she comes away with the higher points there. But because she didn't, and she only had the one leg, and then in this process, she also, like she still has the leg, but now this is red. Red set her feet, changed directions a little bit, and notice she let go as she was going through that process. So in this case, the best opinion of mine would be for red. All right, here's another scenario. So same situation here. So red makes that leg attack. So they scored it 4 red, 2 blue, and 2 red. So let's watch this again. One thing you notice is the first thing I noticed in this action, because this got challenged, and this is the U23s a couple of years ago, and I did the review. The first thing I noticed right now, red has one leg, but watch red here in a second. Red switched over and was able to get to 2. And so blue's initial action was going a different way. Like blue's trying to kick it this way, so it's trying to go across this way. But then red's able to circle and then come across and get the two legs. And so in this process, now when we look at it, we're going from what we talked about last time, going from the standing position directly to danger. Somebody's going to get 4 points in this scenario because they were both standing when this action occurred. The question is always who gets the 4 points? You know, who ends up with the 4 points? In that last video, the counterattack got the 4 points because she took it away. She let go of the leg. In this situation, red was able to get to that double leg, is able to keeps the leg, and then comes back up on top. Now, I actually think they scored this right with the 4, 2, and the 2, because I do think that blue does make a counterattack, but the higher point values go to red, all right? Because red got the 2 legs, changed direction, blue goes to their back. If you go to your back making a counterattack, certainly there's a possibility you're going to give up 4 points in this, all right? And so red for 4 points, but blue does make the counterattack here, rotates them over, and so here you end up with the 2 blue. And I actually think it was right coming back up on top, because he does rotate him and he does hit his head and he's still here. Notice that red still has the legs, but heads touching, shoulders touching the mat, 2 blue. And then red's able to come back up on top and takes blue back into that danger position again. So I think the 2 red were good. So in this case, the higher point value went 1, getting the 2 legs mattered, and then 2, keeping a hold of that lock throughout the duration. Now, if they scored that last one, if they would have scored that 4 red, 2 blue, 1 red, that would have been, I would have been okay with that too. Like I thought 2 red was a better last call, but the 4 red, 2 blue, in my opinion, was the correct call to start that with. Got the 2 legs, and then, you know, the counterattack occurred. Here's another situation. We have the 1 leg versus 2 legs again. So watching it again here. So red shoots, red has 2 legs. Blue goes straight back. Blue makes a counterattack. And this is where sometimes we get where blue made an attack. The problem, there's 2 problems with this from blue's standpoint. Number 1 is red's got 2 legs. Number 2, they continue to travel in the same direction. There wasn't a direction change. Like they're going straight back. And if you go straight back, if you're under attack and you're going backwards and you go straight to your back in that process, you're going to give up 4 points. All right. So there was no direction change. So red's got 2 legs. There's no direction change. And as we progress through this mat, through this part, you can see right now between the referee's legs here, blue is on flat on their back. Again, it's hard to have any type of counterattack if you go, you know, as being the highest point scorer, if you go flat to your own back on the counter, like it just doesn't go well. All right, so in this case, it's 4 red, and this only ends up being 4 red, largely because red maintains that and then comes back up on top easily, and his momentum kind of carried him over in this, and so this will get scored 4 red. And the process here, and then rotates and circles back. So they score this 4 red, and I would say this will get scored 4 red every time. There's got to be somehow a direction change to pop of something to get for blue to get 2 points in this. Just going straight over the top, red holds on and then comes right back on top is typically going to go for only the attacking wrestler. All right, so here's the Freestyle World Cup a couple of years ago as well. And then here's a 1 leg versus 2 legs. And now we've got another part here of danger or not. Did they go to the danger position in this process? And this is probably a good point when we talk about what are the countering, you know, what can you expect if you make a counterattack? So blue shoots James, wrestler from Japan. He's got 1 leg, so he's not got 2. And James makes a counterattack right there. So let's watch this again. So what should this get scored? All right. So a couple things when we go, we're like, all right, well, he only has one leg. So one leg is not as good as two legs, but he does have a pretty good grip on this. Now, red's under attack and red's wrestling through this position. And here's the one thing. If you make a counter attack, so James makes a counter attack. So he's standing, he's under attack. Pause it here. He makes a counter attack. He goes to his own back to make this counter attack. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you make a counter attack and you go to your own back in the process, you better make sure they go to danger. Because if they don't go to danger, you're giving up the most points in this process. Because blue was the initial attack was by blue. So blue's still working on the leg. Red decides to commit to go to this counterattack. The question is, and I watched this live, is when he goes, blue never goes to danger. Like he goes here, red James goes to his own back here. Blue still has the lock on the leg, never came off of it, keeps the lock on the leg all the way through, doesn't go to danger, and then comes up on top of this and finishes this action here. All right. I can tell you what they scored was not correct. They scored this as 2 red and 2 blue. At no point could there ever be 2 and 2. Somebody had to get 4 because it was in the standing position. Had James got him to danger, he would have gotten 4 red. The problem is he didn't get him to danger. So this should have only been scored 4 blue. And this gets into the part of if you make a counterattack and you go to your own back in the process, if you don't score, you will likely give up 4 points. Even though it was maybe your counterattack because you were under attack to start with and a leg attack, and you go to your own back, if you don't score it, it's going to go. The higher points are always going to go to the person who had made the initial attack. So you got to be careful making counterattacks going directly backwards. And honestly, in my opinion in this, like I know they scored it 2-2, so it turned out the score ended up at the end of this ended up being 8-2. So it's still the same thing. But if you really think about from a strategy standpoint here, like in this scenario, he's wrestling through this. At worst right now, maybe he goes out of bounds near the edge and he gives up 1 point. So, or he wrestles through whatever it is. So it ends up being 6-1, minimum, maybe 6-2. In the process of doing this, he may give up 4 points in that process, and now it's 6-4, and now the whole match has changed. You know, he's got a commanding lead at 6-0. Now it's 6-4. He's a takedown away from losing. So I think that you got to be careful in terms of when they're making that counter attack of when is that a good choice? When is that not a good choice? In my opinion, that was not a good choice by him because that's a high risk, high reward by making a counter attack going to your own back. Similar situation, but you'll notice something different here with this one. So watching this again. So again, blue makes the attack. So it's a very similar situation. Head's a little different, head's outside. But he kicks it over. Notice that this time red made the counterattack. One, he changed the direction on him, but he did the most important part here is when he makes this attack, he gets him to danger. So notice he gets him past 90. And that last action, James didn't get him past 90. He didn't get him exposed. So as a result, James couldn't score any points. All right. In this situation, red was able to make that counterattack here and was able to kick that over to that side and get the 2 points. All right. So now why is this 2 and not 4? All right. Well, in this case, blue attacked, but notice when red makes this counterattack, blue is on a knee. So that makes this a parterre action. All right. So we go back to that standing. So now we're taking what we had the last time we were together about how we evaluate holds. And now it gets put into this scenario in a more complicated situation. All right. So in this case, the red makes the counterattack here, but blue was on their knees to start with. We have a direction change because he goes this direction. He goes to danger, but it started on its knee, so it's only 2 points. So there's the 2 red. Blue comes up on top for 1 blue. So the referee team scored it well there. So again, if you have a direction change with this, that's good, but you got to make sure that they go to danger in this process. If they don't go to danger in this place right there, you're going to give up the most points here. But he was able to get them, so red scored the points. All right, next situation here. So we're out of bounds. The question is who scores points and who gets what points out of this. I can tell you what the referee scored isn't a possibility because, again, they were standing and somebody went to danger. Actually, I think both of them may be in danger, but somebody's got to get 4 points here. All right. Now, the question is who scores what here? So there's a couple of things. So first we go back to the 1 leg versus 2 legs. Typically, 2 legs is going to score you more points. There's one thing that's different about this as blue's attacking here. All right, blue's attacking and gets to the edge right here. Notice that they're going to stop. So they stop and then they change directions. So we had a stopped action and we changed the direction of this. So that's not going to be blue making that action. That's red making the action. So now we're evaluating it from red's perspective. And in this case, so red made the action. Red is still in bounds because we watched that from the other side. I can tell red's still on. But blue went to danger. And because blue went to danger, this is going to be 4 points for red. So this counterattack scored for red. Now, from a coaching perspective, I'll be honest with you. I thought if there's about 10 seconds to go and you're losing, you know, or if you go out of bounds, you would lose, then that's worth doing, in my opinion. In this particular situation, like I look at this scenario right now from a coaching perspective, and red's up 1-0, 1-0 right now, and there's 2:08 left in this match. So blue makes this action, and they're driving, and they get to here. All right, now red makes an action. Red's making an action going to her own back, basically. She makes a turn, but she is going to danger in this process. If she doesn't expose blue, she's going to give up 4 points. So right now, let's say she gives up 4 points. Now it's 4-1, and blue's got a commanding lead in the second, 2 minutes into the second period. At this point, if red simply steps out of bounds and just goes out of bounds, maybe it's 1, maybe it's a caution on 1, but it's 1-1. That means any points out of red the rest of the match would win her the match. So again, in my opinion, it worked out for her, but you have to be okay with the high risk, high reward process here. Because anything going to your back, countering, is going to be 4 points one way. Potentially be, especially because we're in the standing position, is going to be 4 points one way or the other. And because it's going out of bounds, only one person can score. All right, there's not a chance for a counterattack out. All right, so they did score this as 4. We scored this after we reviewed this, got scored as 4 red. But again, high risk, high reward in that process. All right, so here's another scenario. I'm going to show you there's 2 videos here. So I know we've probably all seen this where somebody double legs up, double legs, lifts, and as they hit, there's like a roll through with it. All right, and then you see the person who's like rolling through. I talked to one of the men's senior athletes after I did this presentation for the men's team, and one of the wrestlers was on the call and said, "Hey, would you mind looking at this video?" And I looked at a very similar video of him wrestling another one of our wrestlers at I think at Final X, and he said, "Why did I not get scored? Why did I not get scored any points here? Why did all the points go to him?" And I said, "Well, this is what I saw, and here's the scenario. This is almost identical to the scenario, but you get the double leg and you get like a lift, and then you get this roll through." So let's take a look at this first one. So he lifts, drops, and then separates. Okay, so one more time here. So lifts him up, got the hands locked, drops him, let's go, and then red comes around on top. All right, so match is over now. All right, so let's go to the next one. Similar situation. Double leg lifts, drops, hangs on, rolls through. All right, so again, one more time on this video. All right, now going back. I go back one video here. Okay, so here on this video, this action is different. The one thing that's different is what happens when they land. All right, so blue lifted up, and as blue landed, blue let go and was going to let go and either try to catch or just belly out at that time. So in this situation, because he lets go and he bellies out, they're going to score this as 4 points for blue because this was action started in standing. Red went to danger. This is blue's action, even though red's like trying to roll through with it. But because when they landed, blue separated their hands. Now there's not a roll through. It's just kind of like he hit, he let go, and he's either going to try to catch him on his back there potentially, or he's bellying out and wrestling through. Either way, it'll go 4 blue, and because red came on top, it's going to be 1 red, but it's not going to be 2 red. And that's the part here is if you look at the next situation here, notice how when red makes the attack here, red hangs onto the legs and then rolls through with the process. So, hold on 1 second. Okay. Sorry, somebody jump in my classroom here and ask a question. So they lift it up, made an action, gets dropped, but hangs on. If you hang on and you roll through that process, this is either going to go 1 of 2. They're going to score 2 for the counterattack every time. So if I'm teaching this position for me, I'm teaching if I go 2 legs up and I start to go, as soon as we lift and drop out of that double, I'm going to separate my hands. Because as soon as they land and I separate, 1 of 2 things may happen. I might catch them and hold them on their back. Or if I don't do that, and they come back on top, it'll probably go 4-4, potentially 4-4-1, or maybe 2-1. But in this situation that we just saw right here, this is going to go probably get scored 1 of 2 ways. They're either going to score this as 4 red, 2 blue, or it's going to be 2 red, 2 blue. Either one of those 2 are pretty close, and I think you would see both of those. But my point here isn't so much the first action, it's what happens afterwards. Because red hangs onto the legs and rolls through with it, they're going to give up 2 points here. All right, and I think that's the part when you do this is there's times when you want to maintain the lock, and then there's times when you want to separate it. If I'm just driving on a double and I'm going forward, I want to keep those legs. If I'm lifting and rotating down, as soon as we hit, I'm going to separate those hands and try to catch or belly out or wrestle through that position. Because if I hang on to it and I roll through, I'm probably going to give up 2 points on the back end of that. All right, another scenario here. So we've got direction change and danger position here. So red makes the attack, and then blue kicks them up over the top and ends up on top. So whose action is this? Well, let's take a look at this. So kind of going here. So red's attacking now. So blue made the first attack, but now red's kind of getting that double, kind of driving across as it goes. Now blue is going to make this counterattack and try to hip him over. The problem for blue is 2 things. Number 1, the direction never changed. So once they started driving that way, he continued to go backward and went backward in the same direction. And you can see in this process too that blue went flat to his back. That's another bad scenario. And lastly, in this process is red does an amazing job here of cartwheeling out of this and just bellies out. So it's difficult. So he never goes to danger. So how they scored this is exactly how I think it should have been scored in this. I thought it was a great action and a great call by the referee team. And you can see if you recognize the guy on the far side, it's Sam Julian. And so in this case, because you had the double leg and it didn't change directions going across, even though it's not great technique, if you go straight backwards to make that counterattack, again, no direction change, you're probably going to give up 4 points in this. So blue gives up 4 points. So red gets 4 points. And had red gone to danger, it would have been 4 red, 2 blue. But because red did a great job of cartwheeling out of this and bellying down, blue ends up on top for 1 blue out of bounds. So in this situation here, I think that by blue, this is his best option because either 17 seconds left to go in the match. There wasn't a better option, and he's down by 2 points to start with. So this is a good attempt. You know, you got to try something at that point. But this will get scored for red because again, the attack went straight down, no direction change, and went to both shoulders. All right, now here's a couple of out of bounds situations. So blue's got the double leg, they're driving. Red makes a counterattack as they go out of bounds. One thing to keep in mind when actions go out of bounds, only one person gets to score. So if this was scored inbounds, it would be scored a little different than if it's scored out of bounds. In this case, because the counterattack started out of bounds, the only thing that scores here is the double leg. So the only score in this is going to be for blue. So getting a double leg, taking it to the edge and finishing out of bounds, typically a good thing because it eliminates the counterattack. Had this been in the center of the mat, this would have gotten scored for blue to red. This would have been for a 4-2 situation. But because it went out of bounds, it's only for blue. So here's another situation. This is the World Championships a couple years ago as well. One thing to note, there's two actions here. There's a counterattack first that gets scored, and then there's an action going out of bounds. So we'll look at both of them. So no points here. Red's still working. Red's head's on the mat right now, so we're in parterre. Blue kicks him over, so blue gets 2 for the counterattack there. There was a pause. And now we've got this double going out of bounds. And what gets scored here? So blue got scored on the initial one. So right here, we're sitting here, we're stopped. And now blue kicks it up and over. So there's 2 because he gets into danger. Now we're in a new situation. Now, notice that red now gets to both legs. So it was on one leg, now it gets to 2 legs. This changes it a little bit. Now we start to wrestle. And he's going here, and now blue makes this counterattack, but he's got 2 legs, and he's going straight backwards in this part and goes right over top. So now, because we're going out of bounds, it's only the attacking wrestler that's going to get the points in this case. So in this case, that out of bounds is going to be scored for red. So the first action was to blue. The second action was for red. And again, a couple of things. Notice the 2 arm gets the 2 legs, comes up. Blue might plant his feet, but again, you're making a counterattack going backwards, and you're going one, you've already stepped out of bounds standing. That's not good for you either. Red's still in bounds, so they can still wrestle. All right. And then makes this counterattack going straight backwards. And you can see right here, blue's flat on their back. So 4 points for red. All right. The counterattack is now out of bounds. Again, had this been inbounds, this could have been a 4-2 situation. All right, the next scenario is that attack, counterattack when it's in parterre. Kind of what we just saw in that last scenario for that first action is what can we do here? So in that last one, we had those actions going out of bounds. If it were me, anytime I get a double leg, and if I get a double in the air, I am walking it to the edge, and I am finishing it going out of bounds. I'm going to double leg. I'm going to cartwheel myself out of bounds, try to get 4 points. And no matter what happens, because we're going out of bounds, I'll be the only one scoring. All right. I can tell you, I teach my kids directly that if we get legs up in the air, we're walking them to the edge anyway, but then we're going to finish there. All right. Now this situation is the attack, counterattack, but we're in parterre. So this is where we got like, we're on a single leg, either a head outside single, sitting on the mat, like in a crackdown position. Or maybe our head's kind of trapped inside. We're in that body lock, chest lock position. How do we maximize our scoring or eliminate points in both of these? So that's what we're going to look at. So here's from the Olympics with Jordan Burroughs in this situation, and we'll score this one first. Again, there's times when you want to hang on to legs, and there's times when you want to let go of the legs. All right. In this case, this is going to get scored to red because he takes him to his back, but then he rolls him through because that roll through, and they're going to score that to blue. So that's going to be a pretty easy 2-2 call. All right, and this will get called 2-2 almost every time because he just rolled through with him. Okay, and notice that he let go of those legs when he was rolling through to that position. Again, it's different than our double leg up and then we drop him versus we're on a leg, we're in a chest lock, and we kind of tip him up and then we roll through with it. Okay. All right, here's Kyle Dake, a couple of years ago, 2018 World Cup. Similar situation, head outside on this. So he attacks the leg right there in that high crotch. They go bound to parterre. They scored this situation only 2 red. All right, I think, when I look at this, I think there's 2 calls here. But what I think is important here is at least there's a second option. And what was different between this one is Kyle never came off the leg in this. So when we're in this situation where you're in that parterre, like leg attack, you got one leg, you don't have two, you're in this like chest lock position here. So they get down to parterre, so they're here. If it were me and I'm coaching this, I am coaching him to whenever we go over in this, I'm going to elevate that leg and I'm going to hold on to that leg and I'm going to continue to wrestle after we finish that. And I think that's why Kyle only got 2 points here in this situation versus it being scored 2-2. Because if we watch Kyle's got this leg, he steps over the leg here. I think Blue makes an action here for sure because he's pushing off that foot right there, but Kyle had stepped over. But Kyle is keeping this leg in contact right there. And notice that Kyle's keeping this leg all the way through this process. And then he gets up and then he drives back across and wrestles through this position and comes on top of this. So in this case, they looked at it and said, only 2 red. Is it possible this will go 2 red, 2 blue? Absolutely. And if it goes 2 red, 2 blue, then it would still be 1 red at the end of this. Okay. But I think that's the part that's different. When I look at these 2 situations, if you have a leg and you're in this position, like you're in a head outside, like a high crotch kind of outside head position, and then you make that contact as you go, if you maintain that leg and wrestle through that, I think you have a possibility of only getting the 2 points. I think if you let go of it and just roll through with it, I think it's going to get scored 2-2 every time. So I think in this situation, by holding the leg and wrestling through it, gives you a chance to only get the points in this situation. All right. And we know that this situation is something that happens pretty routinely. Anytime we get those leg attacks, we get those chest locks, what happens from there. So that's from an attacking wrestler. That's how I would try to maintain and try to get the most points is by holding the leg in this situation and then wrestling through it if we do get rolled through in that position. All right, last one here. So a little bit of you make the call here. And then I'll kind of recap stuff. Let's watch it again. This is a really tough call because when we look at this, we're like, red is the attacking wrestler, but I can tell you the referee and the judge both scored 4 blue on this. When I watched this, there's a couple of things to point out. So first off, when we look at this, this is why it's so difficult, and I think that sometimes I always did this at Fargo. We always had a coaches meeting before the tournament would start, and I would put up situations like this. And I'd say, all right. And I have all the coaches in there. I'd say, all right, tell me what the score was for this. And I get situations like this or some even more complicated than this one. And I'm like, all right, score it. And they would score. I would get in the room, I might get 3 or 4 different opinions about how this should be scored. And my point wasn't to say, here's the right answer. My point in that situation was, this is a really difficult call and it can get scored either way. And depends on where you're at. Sometimes you're going to get that call. Sometimes you're not going to get that call. Just know that these are tough situations and they have to get scored quickly. And they're going to score at the best of what angle they have and what they see. They're going to score it based on that part. All right. So this situation, I think, probably could go either way. I've had some discussion with coaches about this. I will tell you, I know exactly why they scored it for blue. Because when you look, you're saying, well, red's got a double leg. They're traveling in the same direction. They're going, 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 going. The one thing I'm going to point out to this that helps indicate, there's two things that I think help indicate this, and it happens really quick, is we start to see a little bit of a direction change, but you're going to watch red's hand right here come apart off that leg. And one of the things I mentioned in that first question I had is, do they maintain the lock throughout the duration of the hold? She still has this one, but this one's not as important as this one right here. If she keeps this and she doubles her over, I think she scores 4. But because she posts her hand as blue's making this counterattack, this is what they saw right here. Like, this referee saw this as well. The judge is looking through, saw this part, and this is why they scored at 4 points for blue. So as they continue to keep going, she has let go of that, and she makes that turn, and she rotates out. And again, because this is an out of bounds situation as well, only one person can score this position. So it's either got to be for blue or it's got to be for red. Certainly could make an argument to say this is going to be for red, but I can make an argument this is going to be for blue. All right. And they scored it for blue, and I can see exactly why they scored it. So just know in these situations.
Zach, I got a question. What doesn't blue touch out of bounds first? So I would give 4 red, because if it's one person scoring, blue, I'm looking at blue back touching out of bounds, and when you went over the other scenarios, I took that in consideration. Wouldn't that? This is a difficult for me. It would be difficult as a coach. I would want 4 red, because I'm looking at blue touching her back out of bounds first, and then then it will be done.
Sure. So what I can tell you is, just because you touch out of bounds first doesn't mean you can't possibly score. Like, just because if I step out of bounds and I make an action, my action still counts. All right. If I step 2 feet out of bounds, then I'm here. But if you're, as a referee here, says this action, because right now, if you say this action started here, like, if she let go, is blue still on bounds right now? And that's the question I would say. I'm not saying that the 4 red is not an acceptable call here. I'll be honest with you, this could get called either way, and depends on which side of it on. You're going to argue that side. You know, as a coach, you're looking at one side. When we're looking at neutral, it's a little different, because we don't have a dog in the fight here. But when this action started, like, everybody's in bounds right now. So what they were saying here is that this counterattack started in bounds. All right. So just because she hit out of bounds first, she's still able to score. All right. She's still able to score. And red does go to danger in this process, goes up and over. So right there. Now, is this going to get scored for blue over time? No, it's probably going to be 50-50. If I show this video to 100 people in the room, it's going to be, there's a lot of calls that are going to be 50-50 in these situations. And I think that's an important part as a coach to know. Like, sometimes you're going to get that call, and sometimes you're not going to get that call. And understanding, if you make some subtle changes here, like if red could easily have helped herself by keeping a hold of this leg and then trying to shift her weight a little bit to the right. Because then blue is going directly to both shoulders in this, because blue hits her left shoulder first. And if she can change that a little bit, then she's going to increase her chances of getting more points in this scenario. So that's the part. If not, you're running the risk of this is going to be a judgment call, and it's going to have to be a judgment call that happens really fast. And so it may go your way, it may not go your way. All right, kind of recapping just a couple of things. I think getting 2 legs certainly increases your chance of getting the higher points. Not saying it's going to happen every time, but certainly gives you a higher probability of getting more points in this. Okay, so I think that's an important part of having 1 leg versus 2. Counterattacks. I think when you're looking at counterattacks, I think the one thing you got to be willing to say is, if you're going to make a counterattack that's going backwards, you have to be okay with the high risk, high reward. You may come out of that with more points, but you also may give up more points in this. versus a rotating hip action that goes out of bounds. Like if I'm countering, particularly going out of bounds, if I make a whizzer and I try to hip and rotate out of bounds, it's possible that I will maybe give up 2, maybe I'll give up 1, but I know I'm not giving up 4. So I think as a coach, you have to decide, if you're under this attack, what type of counter are you going to do when you're going out of bounds in that situation? Do you want it going backwards, or do you want to try to make a hip rotation? For me, we typically try to make a hip rotation because I may come away with higher points, but there's a good chance I'm going to give up more points doing that. So I'm not a high risk, high reward unless I just don't have a better option at that time late in the match. That double leg barrel roll, again, if you lift and they rotate down at the attack, that's a situation where this is probably the only time where I would say let go of the leg when you hit. So right when you land, you separate your hands and you either try to catch them or you're able just to wrestle out of it. That gives you the higher points. If you don't and you roll through, you're probably going to give up 2 points in that scenario. And from a defensive wrestler's position, this is certainly not a good first option to go to. I've seen some wrestlers go to this as their first option, like they're getting doubled and they kind of jump over the top to try to go to the roll. It looks at such a close look of the person's lifting as you're going to the side that, again, when it's doubt, the attacking points go to the attacking wrestler. So for me, it's not a good option, especially if if they're in a double leg. And a high crotch, okay. Double leg, not a good option. Here's the head outside single kind of chest lock position in parterre. In this case, this is again where I would want to maintain the lock all the way through and wrestle through it. So if you can keep the hold and you can elevate the leg, it'll either get scored 2-2 or it'll just be 2 for you. So but there's a chance that it may just get scored 2 for you. If you let go of the leg, it's inevitably going to get scored 2-2 immediately. So at least by holding the leg and elevating it and trying to wrestle through that gives you a chance of potentially only coming away with the only points here. Counterattacks and you go to your back and don't score, you're going to give up the most points possible. So if you make a counterattack but you don't get them to expose, know that you will likely give up 4 points in that scenario. Because if it's standing and goes to danger and they don't go to danger, even if you made a direction change, even if you stopped them and did something because they were the initial attacker, you're likely going to give up 4 points in that scenario. The next one is the double in the air. If I get a double in the air, walking it to the edge and finishing it out, like that would be, I would have that in, we do that a lot. We do it on the crash pad, double, like get it lifted or run it over to the edge, boom, cartwheel it going out of bounds. That way I'm going to score the 4 points. I can roll through it. Doesn't matter what happens after that because I'm making that action, in there. So if I can get them up in the air elevated, I'm doing that. I typically do that anyway with single legs. I get a single leg up on the edge. I'm walking to the edge, going to finish going out of bounds because the minimum I'm going to get 1 point on that. And maybe I can get 2 or more. But doubles, if I get a double up in the air, I'm not going to finish that in the center of the mat typically. I'm going to walk it to the edge, cartwheel it out. That way there's no chance for counterattack. And then last thing here is on the out of bounds. Again, only one person is typically going to score in this because the second action is going to occur as a counterattack. As we looked at that last situation, only somebody can get 4 points there. We can argue whether it's red or whether it's blue, but only one person can score in that scenario. If it's in the center of the mat, it could get scored a couple of different ways. But out of bounds, only one person is getting scored. And remember, it's okay to give up 1 or a caution on 1 rather than giving up 4. I've not seen a lot of people get cautioned out of a match in freestyle or women's matches, hardly at all because of cautions. But I have seen people lose matches because they fight an edge and give up 4 points when they could have easily just walked themselves out of bounds in that scenario. So I certainly, it gets back to that, how you're counterattacking going out. Sometimes it's okay. I would be okay to just, all right, go out of bounds, take the 1, take the caution 1, whatever it is, come back in, reset. It's only 1 point. We can make up 1 point. If it's late in the match and you have a choice and you're losing by 4 or 5 points, give it a shot, from there. So So that's just kind of, I would say some things to consider in this process. This is by far the most difficult situation to score, and to score, I would say, consistently, where, because there's so many variations in the changes, and depends on how you look at it and what you see to start with, has a lot to do with how it gets scored. But hopefully those are some things that you could implement or can do that will hopefully help, increase your chances of getting the higher points, or in this case, reducing the amount of points you may give up in that scenario. So does anybody, so at this time, if anybody has any questions, feel free to speak up, or type in the chat box. Either one works too.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. I don't know if anyone has questions, but we recorded this and we'll get this out to everyone. So thank you very much. And your internet works, so that's good.
Okay, that's good, because I got a couple of, it says it's unstable when it was happening. So I was like, not sure if it was going to hang in there or how well it would do. So, but certainly if anybody has any questions beyond this, I'll take a look at it, like I did with one of the men's freestyle wrestlers. They actually said, "Hey, Zach, can we," and I had talked to him before. He'd been on a Zoom call with us. And so he just said, "Hey," so I met up with him, connected, and I watched the video and gave him my 2 cents for what it was worth, on that part. So if you have any other actions or situations that come up, feel free to, reach out to me. I'll gladly take a look at them when I can and get back to you with my thoughts. So.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
So we've got about 5 minutes. So I know some people had to jump off. And like I said, we're recording this. So I just wanted to give a couple updates and get some maybe votes or discussion on when would be a good time in January to do this session and which topic. And so first we'll go with that. So next month, our coaching staff had talked about, we can do PERT chart, how to utilize a PERT chart and practice planning, or we can do periodization. So whether that's in the 4-year cycle, whether, it's you're developing a freshman to a senior or your team, or an annual, and kind of break down all the way to maybe a daily. What would you guys prefer? If there's a vote, and you guys can put it in the chat or unmute yourself. And I'm just going to go off whoever's here, that vote, and that's what we'll go with for next month.
I'm good with anything.
Okay. Yeah, I think both are really good. And to be honest, they pair really well. It's just to do it, we've tried to do it in an hour. It's just too much information. And to just to let you guys know, we don't necessarily want it to be so much of we're talking for an hour, or Terry can go through a presentation, but we don't want to do all the talking. So we want to split it up to start splitting up the calls where, we do announcements, we hear what's going on in your program, or if any updates from you guys, updates from us, and then split it into sharing information, education, and then we would like to do breakout rooms and discussion, or as a group, and have a little bit more discussion about some of these things. So it's not just an hour Zoom and check in, check out. So that's what we're thinking. Andy, I'm not sure if you had anything. I saw you were unmuted.
Yes. I think when I think about periodization, I think there was a pretty good presentation at the convention this summer, but it seemed to be more focused on senior level athletes and like a 4-year cycle, whereas, a lot of us are college coaches and it's more kind of within a season. And at my school specifically, we're a Division III school, so we're limited as to what we can do in the off season to begin with. So if it was maybe a little more focused toward a college level rather than senior, that would be helpful, I think.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. And I know that when we had talked about the presentation, Terry definitely had insight, whether it was high school season or a college season, and he had a little bit more of developing a young team or developing a freshman to a senior in college. So that we can definitely gauge those conversations, and then again, like have a lot of discussion. I think it'd be more of a two-way than a like that presentation form. So thank you, and I'll make note of that. Other than that, I'll just give some quick updates for anyone on the call and who's listening. So for us here in Colorado Springs, we've been training full time, and then El Paso County here has gone into a red phase, and possibly purple is next. So we've had to move our residents off campus. So we're training at a private facility with a small group. And then we're trying to plan, we have a national team camp plan, very small numbers, very limited in Arizona. So that's what we're doing on our end, and just going through protocols and travel and figuring out, you know, the pieces of that. So that's what we've got going on. Our women's freestyle committee meets this Thursday, and they're voting on the procedures for the 2021 World Team Trials. And just to reiterate or remind people that anyone from the U23 or juniors tournament that was in Omaha that won their weight class are qualified for that World Team Trial. So they haven't made a team yet, but they punched basically their ticket to that World Team Trial for 2021, which will be sometime in September. So that's that. And then I think that's all I had on our end. And I don't know if anyone else had updates. I know people were asking, are people still competing, or what events are still going on? I don't know if you guys had anything. And I guess maybe my main question is like, are you guys still able to practice or have a season? I know some people, there was a couple programs that said they're done for the season.
Our women's team isn't competing this year, but that's mostly due to numbers being our first year and everything. But we were actually able to practice the last half of the semester, and it was really, really great. So, and they're letting us come back early to school and continue to work for the rest of the year as of right now. So that's pretty awesome.
That's good.
Jess, we've been surveying because I'm on because of the national tournament and stuff, and we're going to have a new survey that I can update you with the schools that are going to compete, the school, like the intent to compete, and just kind of an updated thing. So right now, I mean, national tournament is planned on going on, and we're still in the planning processes of that, and the majority of schools are competing. So it hasn't been too bad.
Okay, good. Okay.
I
Awesome.
had a question. I wanted to see if you guys are practicing as groups or big groups there in Colorado. How do you guys handle like the warm-ups and whatnot? Obviously, when they go to practice, they're in pairs or groups of 3 at max. But how do you guys handle warm-ups? Do you guys handle it differently with COVID going on at all?
So like when we first started out here at the training center, they had the athletes warm up with mask. They're wrestling together, so we don't allow that. We don't really have the athletes wearing their mask. We as a coaching staff, if we jump and wrestle or we're working with an athlete, we have to have our mask on. And then the big thing for us is training pods. So really just keeping a group together. So if in the beginning, we were encouraged not to even do partner drills or have them warm up individually. So we do, more of like line drills or individual drill for them. And then we keep them in their pods. So according to weight classes, we really only have 2 pods, and then have them warming up together, drilling together, wrestling together. And that's how the training center has allowed us to still have our groups practice at the same time and have one practice. So, and same thing, we do temperature checks. They check in with our trainer. They fill out an Excel sheet that our trainer can see and have access. So they fill out if they have any symptoms, and then that way we have that on hand in case, down the line we need it. So other than that, yeah. You have any?
No, sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah. So, okay. If there's nothing else, I see periodization. We'll send out, sorry, what date would be good for a guesstimate? Like we have camp January 3rd through the 16th. So the later half of January would be ideal for us. But again, like I know you guys are competing and have programs. So what would work for you guys timeframes?
We're going to be in season for most of our stuff during that time. So like a Thursday would probably like work probably better the second half of January. So, I mean, that we don't have any matches on Thursdays, which would be probably better for us.
Okay.
Probably early afternoon, just like this one, like at noon. Just so, I mean, we practice in the afternoon, so that's probably out of the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. Tuesdays and Thursdays works best for me personally, but I can make anything work really.
Okay. Okay, so I'll look at that and then send something out either the 20, maybe that 21st or 28th. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. So, and then I'll send this recording out to everyone. So. Thank you guys for
Thank
joining.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
You too.